Toronto sports radio, and the narrative always is that as soon as a new player gets a big ticket contract in that, let's say, early to mid 20-year-old age group, people automatically start comparing it to Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. And I mean, Austin Matthews obviously was younger when he signed his contract. He didn't get a bridge like Barkov did. But I mean, now you have Barkov locked in for 10 years at $1.6 million less than Austin Matthews. And I mean, it kind of comes down to your preference of player, but you could make the case that Barkov is a better hockey player than Austin Matthews, and vice versa. If you value goal scoring more, maybe like me, I would err a bit on the side of Austin Matthews just because of how elite he is. But when you take into consideration the price tag and cost certainty that Barkov comes with, as opposed to Matthews making 11.6, and you're going to walk him right to UFA status at the age Barkov is now, it really is a no-brainer to be like, okay, well, I rather Sasha Barkov. And then you take into Mitch Marner into consideration. So, yeah, like you said, we're almost preconditioned now to whenever a big-time elite player in their quote-unquote prime gets a big-ticket contract, you automatically just jump to comparing and, depending on which side of the fence you stand on, criticizing the work that Kyle Dubas has done with Toronto.
Absolutely. How about Michael Zibanejad? 8 years, $8.5 million, which in retrospect, yeah, he's a great player, but his 8 years may be a little too long because that's going to bring him to his age 36 season. And, you know, anybody who's going past the 32, 33-year-old mark, you normally see a decline, especially for a player that, you know, with Zibanejad's style. What do you think?
Well, look, I think the Sean Couturier contract really set the stage for Mika Zibanejad. You know, these guys are, I think, 5 months in age difference. Couturier being a little older, both drafted in the first round in 2011. And Couturier got 8 by 7.75, I believe, which will walk him to 6 years as well. And you know, we were just comparing Austin Matthews to Sasha Barkov, and it kind of depends on your preference of the player on which one you think is better. I think Zibanejad to Sean Couturier falls in that category as well, but more in the next tier of centermen in the NHL. Like, I think you can make the case that both of these guys fall somewhere in the 10 to 15 range among all centers in the NHL. So Couturier gets $7.75 million, and I think it kind of comes down to A, he gave the Flyers a little bit of a hometown discount, and B, he's not really an offensive stalwart. Like when Sean Couturier carries the puck over the blue line into the offensive zone, he's not really the type of player that strikes fear into opposing teams' defensive forwards. That would be more of Mika Zibanejad's department. But if you're asking me, what player would you rather have when, you know, trying to close out a game with a 2-1 lead in the final 5 minutes of Game 7, I'm probably going with Sean Couturier. So I got to be consistent with what I said before with Matthews and Barkov, that because I value offense a little bit more when it comes to top level centers in the NHL, I would probably err on the side of Mika Zibanejad. And that's why I think he got that, $800,000 more in salary over his average annual value. Yeah. But at the same time, I think Couturier kind of set the benchmark here. And you could probably make the case Couturier is a better centerman too, but I guess I'll throw it to you. Where do you kind of come down with this personal preference?
Well, I have to agree that Couturier is a better centerman, period. I mean, if I had to choose between one or the other, Couturier would be my first center. And let's say I'm GM of Montreal right now, and I had someone offered me both Zibanejad and Couturier. So you have to pick one. He's good, and I'm taking Couturier all day, every day. Not only just because of the tangibles that Couturier brings over Zibanejad, there's the overall. There's a physicality aspect of it. There's the clutch plays as well. That Couturier just seems to have more presence as well. And I think there's the playoff experience as well. I mean, Zibanejad has had maybe one playoff, I think back in 2017 or with the Rangers, where they made it to the second round, where he was really shining. But other than that, the handful of times where they showed up is just, I don't know. He never strikes me as a playoff performer as of yet, of course. But I mean, I understand that he only played me like 30 games or so in the playoffs. Whereas, someone like Couturier has shown time and time again that he can actually carry the entire team on his back. So on the topic of of signatures while we're in this. Let's shift from players to coach. John Cooper signed a 3-year extension in Tampa Bay. I mean, that's just a duh type of signature, of course. But I mean, John Cooper, the one question I'm going to ask, and I'm really curious to pick your brains about this: best coach in the league, or is he just lucky to have such a stacked team in his hands and he just seems just to know what to do with it?
I mean, I'm not going to say he's the best coach in the league. I really just reserve that title for Barry Trotz, and I have for some time now.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think John Cooper's a top 3 coach in the league, and it isn't just because the team is stacked. Because the thing is, and I think people often forget this, is he took the Tampa Bay Lightning to the Stanley Cup final in 2015. And they ultimately lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. And that team wasn't nearly the elite franchise that they were now. You know, Ben Bishop was the goaltender at that time. Victor Hedman wasn't the absolute best defenseman in the NHL. Braden Point wasn't even on the team. I believe Valtteri Filppula was playing second line center for them. So, I mean, that was a very different squad that we saw, 6 years ago now, than the team that just won back-to-back Stanley Cups. Now, that being said, am I going to sit here and deny that he has one of the best teams I've ever seen in my lifetime? Absolutely not. That definitely helps. But for him to stay as relevant as he has for the duration that he has speaks volumes to the type of guy that John Cooper is. And I know that, especially in the analytical world that we all live in now, and everyone runs to the spreadsheets and the courses and the expected goals for, there is a certain intangible aspect it takes to be a good coach. And that's what John Cooper screams to me, is that he's a guy that players love to play for. And indicative of that is him being named as the head coach of Team Canada for the upcoming Winter Olympic Games. So I think that's well-deserved. And again, if I'm not mistaken, he's the longest tenured coach in the NHL. It's crazy to think about, and people don't really realize this, but the last guy to coach the Lightning was Guy Boucher. And Guy Boucher already went through another job in Ottawa. So, I mean, it's crazy the length of his tenure so far. I think we're coming up on 10 years, which is just so crazy to think about, because in the modern day NHL, if you make it past 3, people think that you're a veteran in the game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I mean, look, like I said, I'm not going to call him the best coach in the NHL just because I really believe Barry Trotz has earned that title. But at the same time, I don't think that he's only had as much success because of the roster he's been given.
Speaking of tenure, another news that came out was the Seattle Kraken naming Mark Giordano as the franchise's first captain, which, you know, I'll say, I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again. That's another duh use. But, you know, there's no question that Giordano, you know, he's won the Norris Trophy in 1819. The following year, he's won the Mark Macy Trophy for outstanding leadership. He's always been a great leader. But I'd like to know, first of all, well, 2 things. Mark Giordano, what does he bring to the current Seattle Kraken squad as their first captain, and especially being a 38-year-old defenseman? But at the same time, I'd like to know your opinion as to why did Calgary expose him to the expansion draft? Was it literally just because it was $6.75 million less under cap, despite it being, you know, the final year of the contract? Because, you know, if you go around, you know, the media and saying, and even some fans, and I've spoken to some people, and they're like, a lot of people were saying like, yeah, okay, you know, we got rid of almost $7 million, but you also, it kind of kills the loyalty almost, because like Jordan spent his entire career in Calgary. So like, what was one extra year retire as a Flame versus, you know, finishing a career in Seattle?
Well, for one, I do think that the salary was a big part of it, because they took that close to $7 million that they had with Mark Giordano, and they used that money to allocate it to bring in depth forwards, Blake Coleman on a big ticket contract at $4.9 million over 6 years. And then they acquired Tyler Pitlick from the Seattle Kraken. So they used that money to bolster their bottom 6. And I think Coleman, even though he's suspended right now, is going to get some reps in that top 6, maybe alongside Gaudreau and Sean Monahan. But more so than that, I think it just came down to a numbers game, because you look at the players that they all have on that back end, going back to last season, Noah Hannafin and Chris Tanev that formed a really good shutdown pair for them. Chris Tanev, in my mind, is one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. And
Agreed.
you saw what happened with Quinn Hughes' game
Yeah.
that he created without Chris Tanev.
Exactly.
And I think that's on a side note, the Tanev and Hughes situation is a really good microcosm of somehow analytics can be misleading.
Yep.
That you don't have that veteran presence there to stabilize and give the younger guy the confidence to play more loosely and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a guy by the name of Rasmus Andersson, who is also emerging as a solid top four guy for the Calgary Flames, signed to a 4-year contract at $4.55 million and only 24 years old. So I think they looked at it and they said, we have to protect the two 24-year-olds in Hannafin and Anderson. And we just brought in Chris Tanev, who is a right shot defenseman who really fit like a glove beside Noah Hannafin. We're not going to break that up. And then you have another young guy by the name of Juuso Valimaki, who they're hoping can step into a top four role. They bring in Nikita Zadorov for a fraction of the price that they were paying Mark Giordano. So I think when everything really came together, it made sense both financially and from an on-ice roster perspective to move on from Giordano, which is tough to say, right? The guy's been the captain of the team since, I believe, 2013-14. The last guy to captain that squad was Jerome McGinley. So it kind of gives you an idea of how long Giordano has been the face. And from a Seattle perspective, obviously he's, if I'm not mistaken, he's the only guy who they selected who was a captain on his former team. And he's going to probably come in, be a stabilizing force for a guy like maybe Jamie Oleksiak. I'm not quite sure how their defensive pairings are going to shake out. Even a younger player like Vince Dunn or Hayden Fleury. So, I mean, I really like Adam Larson too. He's going to fit like a glove there. He's wearing an A for the team. So it made sense for the Calgary Flames to move on from him, but at the same time, Seattle is really going to reap the rewards of having this, bona fide leader kind of fall into their lap.
Absolutely. And to end this segment, I mean, obviously we've talked about this in length throughout the show, but since we're doing this segment together, I still would like to know your opinion on the whole Carey Price situation. As you know, he's entered the player assistance program. His wife made statements, saying that, the guy needs a break. He just needs a mental health break, so to speak. I just want to know what your take is on the whole thing.
It's kind of, I think it kind of brings us all back down to earth a little when we see what is a larger than life character, especially in Montreal, have to really take a step back for his own personal health, and in this case, his mental health. And Carey Price, I mean, it's hard to think of an athlete that has meant more to his franchise over the last half decade or so than Carey Price. As he goes, the Montreal Canadiens go. And, from an on-ice perspective, you say, like, man, like the Canadiens are essentially going to start their season without the three most important players that helped them get to the Stanley Cup final just a few months ago in Weber, Price, and Philip Danault. But from a human perspective, you really just have to tip your hat to the guy that he had the courage to put himself into the player assistant program. And whether that be for substance or just depression or whatever that may be, that really doesn't matter at this point. I think it is a good example set by a guy of Price's stature that kind of will hopefully trickle down to players down the umbrella of the NHL, that even if you're a third liner playing for the Arizona Coyotes, you too have the right to worry about your mental health first and worry about your family first, because at the end of the day, hockey is just a job, and people forget that, right? That this is just a job for them, whether you're a guy shoveling for the city of X city or driving a bus. That is what hockey is to these guys. So I truly believe that it's a good example set by Carey Price, and we all just hope that he comes back sooner rather than later, because he is one of the players that the game is just a better place when he is playing at his best. And I think that was on full display during the 2021 playoffs.
All right, Anthony, final 60 seconds. The season is about to start. Finally, it's at our doorstep. We're going to start a brand new NHL season. Give us some hot takes.
So, hot takes, I think that Adam Pelech is going to win the Norris Trophy this season.
Okay.
I think that he has earned that right. I believe that the Winnipeg Jets are going to make a lot of noise this year. And I don't know if they'll get to the Stanley Cup final because they're going to have to go through the Colorado Avalanche. But I like the additions of Schmidt and Dillon on the back end. And you always have a good chance when you have Connor Hellebuck between the pipes. I think this is the year finally